So you're looking for a phone that isn't necessarily going to break the bank, yet is still able to keep up with all the graphically intensive games that you have, as well as all your daily tasks. Well, in my hands is currently one of the most sought after smartphones as far as the second half of 2020 goes. It's been touted as the latest mid-range smartphone killer, and couple that with a very affordable price point and you have yourself one heck of a phone. What's up guys, Josh here of Yugatech, and this is our full review of the POCO X3 NFC. Starting off with the design and construction, it's nice to see that POCO doesn't stray away far from the designs of its predecessors, keeping that simple yet eye-catching aesthetic. We have a generous display size of 6.67 inches, a thickness of 9.4mm, and comes in at a weight of 215 grams. It holds a reasonable amount of heft and is undoubtedly a very robust phone to hold. But some people might actually prefer that more since that chunkiness does give a slightly better sense of security. It's also nice to see that we have a pre-installed screen protector which should keep your phone nice and clean. Focusing on the front, we do get some slim bezels similar to the POCO X2, but what's evidently different here is the front camera setup, as the POCO X3 now uses a center-mounted punch hole camera as opposed to the dual cameras of its predecessor that can be found on the top right corner. We get some pretty thin bezels, with the chin being just a bit thicker than the rest of the sides, which shouldn't matter anyway with a display size this big. At the top sits your earpiece speaker, and behind the grills we have a white LED notification light, which is handy for those situations where you don't really want to open up your phone but still need to know if you missed any calls or messages. Now, as you can see, our unit comes in the darker shadow gray color variant, but there's also a cobalt blue version if you want a more refreshing looking color. We've got a nice polycarbonate panel at the back with a glossy finish, which is housed in a solid aluminum frame. We get some POCO branding at the bottom, and of course an interesting take on the main rear camera setup, wherein we still have the circular design found on the X2, but this time isn't vertically aligned. We have everything mounted at the center in an unusual form, including the LED flash which sits at the top left corner of the module. Now there's still going to be a slight bump jutting out of the panel, but slapping on the included clear jelly case will help protect not only the camera module's edges, but the rest of the phone as well when it comes to scratches and moderate drops. Okay, looking over to the left, we have your hybrid SIM card slot, which can hold either a secondary SIM or a microSD card with a maximum capacity of 256 gig. While on the right, we have your volume rocker keys and your power button, which doubles as a fingerprint scanner. At the top is your secondary noise cancelling microphone, your signature IR blaster, and the top firing speaker, while at the bottom is your Type-C charging slot, your primary mic, bottom firing speakers, and a 3.5mm audio jack, which is always nice to have. As mentioned earlier, the POCO X3 NFC sports a massive 6.67-inch display with a full HD+ resolution, a 20:9 screen aspect ratio, a maximum brightness of 450 nits, and the icing on the cake, a 120Hz refresh rate with a touch sampling rate of 240Hz for all that smooth gaming, which we'll get to in a bit. On top of all of this is Corning Gorilla Glass 5 for added protection. When it comes to watching multimedia content, this device is definitely going to give you a premium experience, especially with those dual stereo speakers that I mentioned located at the top and bottom of this device, which are actually quite loud. Although speakers that fire from the sides can help bounce back sound waves when placing the phone on a flat surface, do take note that you could potentially cover these up with your fingers when watching something horizontally. But upon taking a closer look though, there's actually two outputs coming from this side. One at the top and one by the earpiece, so in a sense, you still get one front firing speaker if you accidentally cover the ones on the side. Heading over to one of the main segments of the show, the POCO X3 NFC is equipped with a quad camera shooter with a 64MP Sony IMX682 sensor at the top right, a 2MP macro lens on the bottom left, another 2MP for depth sensing on the lower right, a 13MP ultra-wide camera right smack in the center of the whole module, and the dual LED flash on the top left. Shots in default mode look very detailed with colors being not too overblown, although if you do want a pop of color, AI mode can also do that for you. We've also got some decent dynamic range, especially when turning HDR mode on, capturing better detail from bright and dark areas in your shot. Now, having an IMX682 sensor means it makes full use of all those 64 million pixels, getting all that sweet detail even when it comes to far distance shooting. Not to mention sporting quad array technology to improve low light shots, which are also quite good as you can see in these sample shots we took in the evening. The ultra-wide camera also provides very clear shots with a viewing angle of 119 degrees. It's good to see that the image quality doesn't stray far from the main camera in terms of detail and viewability, so this is very useful for whenever you find your shot to be a little bit too tight. Nice. Macro shots work pretty great as well, but since this is a fixed focus camera, you're going to have to get around 4 centimeters close to get the best shots. Sometimes it can be a hit or miss, but once you do get the hang of getting really near the subject, everything works out more than fine and passes with flying colors, especially under bright environments. Portrait mode also works great with very good subject background separation for that dramatic depth effect. At the front, we get a generous 20 megapixel camera, which definitely captures all the hairs and blemishes on my face, which is great if we're talking about detail. But of course, we also have those beauty filters as well if you prefer that more. As for video, the POCO X3 NFC's main camera can handle 4K up to 30 frames per second, 1080p up to 120 frames per second, and comes with electronic image stabilization for smooth shooting. Certainly not as stable as higher flagship models, but is still nothing short of impressive. Okay, so now we have steady video on the POCO X3, and as you can see, we're climbing the stairs right now just to see how stable this feature is. And it's looking pretty stable, but mind you, you're only stuck with 1080p at 30 frames per second if you want to use this feature. So if you want that resolution a little bit higher, then you're going to have to lose this feature, but it's still pretty stable nonetheless. So moving on, we're walking around, and we're actually also using the microphone that's built in with the POCO X3, and it actually sounds pretty good, especially with those dual stereo speakers that we have as well. So right now we're just walking around, and let's do some quick jogging. Alright, and maybe a couple jumps. There we go. And a little bit more panning. Hand to the left, hand to the right, up, down, and we think we're good. So, what do you guys think? As for the front camera, we get a resolution of 1080p up to 30 frames per second and actually makes for a very decent vlogging device. The POCO X3 NFC runs on Android 10 skin with MIUI 12, which I'm sure you've heard before is one of my top custom firmwares to have right out of the box. Fortunately, things are much cleaner with not much bloatware apart from a mix of Google and Xiaomi apps. And as far as I've used the phone, there haven't been any unnecessary ads popping out unexpectedly, although there's still an option to turn it off in the settings just in case. Overall, MIUI 12 holds a bunch of small aesthetically pleasing tweaks that make using it as a whole a lot more engaging compared to the previous version. We now have the option to choose between different lock screen styles, a refreshing new take on the settings page as well, and a slight overhaul on some icons and animations. The default camera app also gets an upgraded interface with a lot of customization features like changing the layout and camera modes, customizing the accent colors of the app, and even change the sound of the shutter. But probably the most notable part of it all is the new control center, which replaces the old notification tab when you swipe down from the top. Now you're probably wondering how this setup looks oddly familiar to Apple's iOS, but hey, at least it still gets a little bit of its own touch, so let's just leave it at that. We still get the classic MIUI notification menu out of the box though, so if you want that new look, you're going to have to enable them in the settings manually. Things like system-wide dark mode, game turbo, Mi Share, and second space are all still there, and of course the Mi Remote app for controlling your home appliances. And finally, just like the name says, the POCO X3 also comes with near-field communication, so that's going to be an added convenience, especially when it comes to tap and pay scenarios. Another notable feature is its ability to change the way the sky looks with just the tap of a button. It uses Xiaomi's AI skyscaping technology, which made a debut on the Redmi K20, and we're actually quite surprised at how well it works. You have a bunch of presets to choose to make the sky look anywhere from a bright sunny day all the way to a dramatic moody evening. And probably the coolest one we have here are the dynamic skyscape presets, which basically animate your images with some music to really bring it to life. Our unit has a storage capacity of 128GB, although there's a more affordable 64GB variant as well. If that's not enough, you can always expand your storage space through a micro SD card. As for biometrics, the side-mounted fingerprint scanner is responsive and sits right where your thumb is when holding the phone upright. Of course, Face Unlock is also present, which works just as fast even in less favorable lighting conditions. Moving on to performance, the POCO X3 NFC is the first to be equipped with the Snapdragon 732G CPU, which has a slightly higher clock speed and gets a 15% improvement for the Adreno 618 Elite gaming GPU that's specially dedicated to render relatively better graphics, smoother gameplay, better wireless audio, and more. It's also got liquid cool technology to keep your phone nice and bearable when running intensive tasks. As for memory, we get 6GB of RAM, which is a good enough amount for a lot of multitasking and heavy use, so juggling through different apps is going to be a breeze on this one. When it comes to gaming, this is where the POCO X3 really takes the crown, as almost every game I tested ran very smooth with little to no hiccups. By default, Call of Duty Mobile runs on medium graphics quality with the frame rate set to high, although these can easily be maxed out to the highest settings if you really want the best experience. As for PUBG, we get HD graphics settings as well as a high frame rate, which are the highest settings this phone is capable of doing, and of course we tried Mobile Legends out, safely running on a high preset as well. As for benchmark scores, the POCO X3 NFC gets an AnTuTu score of 282,225, which sits comfortably at 49th place right above the Redmi Note 9 Pro and scores slightly below the Samsung Galaxy S9. If you want to know more, we'll flash the rest of the benchmark scores over right now. One of the final highlights of the POCO X3 NFC is that it has a large battery capacity of 5,160 mAh, which is a big jump from the X2's 4,500 mAh capacity. It's coupled with 33 watts fast charging that's capable of juicing up your phone from 0 to 100% in just 65 minutes. Putting it in our standard video loop test, the POCO X3 was able to last 20 hours and 38 minutes of continuous playback, which essentially means this device is perfectly capable of lasting you the whole day under moderate usage. With a simple solid design, impressive hardware specs, great cameras, and a very reliable battery life, it's not difficult to say that this could well be the best bang for your buck currently out there today. The POCO X3 NFC is priced at 10,990 pesos for the 6 plus 64GB variant, while the 6 plus 128GB version will run you 12,990 pesos. So, what do you guys think of this new device? Is this the new mid-range killer? Let us know in the comment section below what you guys think, and if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to leave a like, subscribe, hit that bell icon, and be sure to visit Yugatech.com for the latest tech news and reviews. Again, this has been Josh, stay safe, and I'll see you in the next one.